Joseph Gordon-Levitt, you know, as an actor. He has been an actor most of his life, from a child star on Third Rock from the Sun to Hollywood starring in indie films like 500 Days of Summer, big budget productions like Inception and Snowden. You take a look at that long list of credits, and you may not know that when he was 19, Joseph Gordon-Levitt hit pause on his acting career to go to college. A few years later, when he wanted to return to the screen, couldn't land a role, and that's when he helped create HitRECord, which is a website where he and his brother posted homemade videos and songs. That was 15 years ago. Today, HitRECord is an online collaboration media platform. It allows artists to share what they're working on and contribute to each other's creative projects. Joseph Gordon-Levitt has been in Toronto for the huge tech conference known as Collision, and he is with me in studio now. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Why did you want to come to Toronto and talk about HitRECord?
Well, so HitRECord historically, and I appreciate the little setup you gave there, was never a technology company. I mean, it started as not a company at all. Like you just said, it was just a hobby thing that my brother and I were doing for fun. And then over the years, it evolved into a sort of a production company. But just recently, we've sort of, we've hit a kind of a limit on our production company side. We've accomplished a lot of the things that we've wanted to do. We've published books, we've put out records, we made a TV show that won an Emmy. But we've realized that as a production company, there's only so many people we can include in those productions. The way that HitRECord works is anybody can come using the internet on our website or on the app and collaborate on these projects. And when we're the ones leading those projects, well, only so many people can be included. And we wanted to figure out, we started thinking about this a year or two ago, how can we include more people? How can we not be the only ones leading these projects? And how can we take what we've learned over the years as a production company and use that knowledge to build tools so that other people can come and lead their own projects or find other people's projects to get involved with? And we knew we had to build better technology for that. So we've been sort of wading into the world of tech. And going to conferences like this one that's here in Toronto right now, Collision, has been a really useful thing. You meet incredibly smart people that provide guidance, that provide connections. And so from forming those kind of connections, last year we raised venture capital for the first time. We went up to Silicon Valley and pitched tech VCs. It probably would have been easier to raise money in Hollywood because, that's the people that I know. Yeah. But we wanted to raise money from technology investors because they could provide us with that guidance, that those networks, and now we're sort of we're evolving the company to really lean into that technology and hopefully include a lot more people. I
want to talk about what it's become in a moment, but just what is it like to see something that started so small become a thing?
It's a really funny thing, man. It's I heard you say 15 years ago, and it's pretty much true. I mean, I think to be fair, 15 years ago, it was one single page of HTML with a couple links to download some things that I had made that my brother helped me put on the internet. You wouldn't call it anything like a company or anything like that. But it was still important to me. Even though it was just a hobby, it was something that I cared about a lot. It actually arose from a time in my life, like you said, when I couldn't get a role, and that kind of pain, dealing with that kind of pain can help you form how you see yourself. And so HitRECord actually is a really big part of how I see myself. And especially because I've been doing it for all this time, it's just very, very dear to me.
You started it with your brother, and I know your brother died in 2010.
Yeah.
As it grows and grows, what do you think about when you think about him and those times and starting it with him?
I'm sure that's part of why it's so dear to me, because it's something that he and I cared about a lot, and getting to see the community continue to grow and flourish, and still appreciate and thrive based on principles that are in many ways his. He was really all about sort of dispelling with your fears, especially your fears to kind of express yourself. He was always, actually, it's funny, he was quite shy younger, and then had a sort of a transition in his life where he made a very proactive decision. I'm not going to be introverted anymore. I'm going to become more extroverted, and got into photography and got into spinning fire and like really got into like dressing in loud creative clothes, and it was not something that came naturally to him. It was something that he decided to do. And I think a lot of folks that come to HitRECord have that urge to express themselves, whether it's through writing or drawing or music or filmmaking or acting or anything, but don't quite feel like they have permission or feel like, oh, I could put something on YouTube, but no one will come to it, or
Is
no
that
one
what
will care.
technology does, though? I mean, that it gives people that permission? I mean, in a different way from how people, it sounds like 100 years ago, but how people used to create in front of other people?
Yeah, I think it has that power, but I also think what we're starting to see is that the business models of today's prominent media tech platforms, they give a certain kind of permission and a certain set of incentives that, in my opinion, are not always the most rewarding or fulfilling, because it's all about getting attention for yourself. It's all about how many likes can I get, how many followers can I get, how much attention can I get, and that's driven by the sort of attention economy business model of these ad-driven platforms.
Yeah.
What we hope to do with HitRECord, and what we've never had ads on our site. We don't really emphasize, hey, how much attention can you get? How many likes, how many followers? It's really less about, hey, world, look at me and look at what I made. And it's more about, what can we make together?
Can you just explain how it works?
Sure, yeah. So everybody can build off of each other. You don't just post something and say, like, here's my finished video. You go on and say you feel like doing some drawing, for example. You could go on and find a whole bunch of different projects of different people who need illustrators. Someone who maybe has already written a script and is like, hey, will someone draw the characters in my story? And then once you've drawn those characters, then you can find animators or voice actors or musicians and other people to help complete the project. And everybody works together and builds off of each other. And when you spend time with people online, having a common purpose, instead of just kind of competing in these like Twitty popularity contests, people relate and treat each other in a really different and kind of warm, positive way that's great to see.
This is really different than how people often think of what technology will do to people, or how it shapes people. I mean, it's meant to be outward looking, whereas a lot of people assume that if you're on these platforms, you're just inside. Mm-hmm. You're focusing on how do you reconcile that?
Well, again, I really think that it's not the technology that creates that behavior. It's the way that a lot of these big companies are making money from the technology that incentivizes that sort of, I think what you're implying is sort of a narcissistic behavior. It doesn't have to be that way. I don't think that phones or the internet or anything like that necessarily leads to narcissism, but I do think that this particular ad model does.
What's your relationship like with privacy and technology, and the way that technology can erode or enhance privacy, and vice versa?
Well, I first started really studying privacy when I played Edward Snowden a few years in Oliver Stone's movie. Yeah. And one of the books that was the most fascinating to me was this book called Who Owns the Future by Jaron Lanier, mm-hmm. which I really recommend.
Created virtual reality.
Yeah, he started the first virtual reality
company.
Yeah, back in the 80s. And has actually been raising his hand about some of the concerns regarding social media that now everybody kind of, largely since I think the 2016 election in the U.S. at least, people are starting to raise these concerns. He was raising those concerns many years ago. But one of the points that he makes that I think is really true is privacy is definitely a concern worth having. But I think that oftentimes the conversation about privacy is sort of missing the other side of the equation.
Which is what?
That when these companies are gathering all this data about you, it's not just an invasion of your privacy. It's what they do with that data and how they manipulate their users. What Jaron calls behavior modification, and this is like scientifically studied stuff using behavioral psychology to take something that you know about somebody and use it to manipulate their behavior beyond their conscious volition, really. What concerns me even more than the invasion of privacy is the kind of behind the curtain manipulation of my will, of my preferences, of my habits, of my mentality. And I can especially speak to that when it comes to the creative process.
How does that work? I mean, do you find yourself, if you know what's happening behind the curtain, are you still getting sucked into what those companies are trying to do, whether it's through social media or whether it's in shaping the creative process? I
try to just use those platforms like Twitter, Facebook, Instagram in a very specific and limited way, because when I do the behavior that it's so easy to get sucked into, which they are designed to suck you into,
gunning for likes and
scrolling
clicks.
and scrolling and scrolling and scrolling and just seeing and comparing myself to others and seeing like, oh, I'm not as popular as this person, and maybe that means that I should post more, and what can I do to get more followers? And when I let myself go down that rabbit hole, I find it very anxiety inducing, and so I try just to not even begin that process.
And so that's why, I mean, it's not as though people become Luddites, but that's why people end up putting the phone away, and they'll delete the apps, and they'll say, I need a technology timeout.
Yeah.
If you go back to HitRECord, you're seeing a real positive benefit to the sense of connection that we have here. That it's not just about manipulation, but there's also the opportunity for collaboration.
100%. Well, look, first of all, I don't think anything in the world is absolute, and certainly you can find tons of positive, great things on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and all these platforms. But I really do think that there's a world that's possible where we can have all the benefits of these technologies. We can have the connectivity. We can stay in touch. We can see other people's perspectives without subjecting ourselves to this sort of opaque behavior modification that's necessary for the ad-driven business model of these companies. If you could provide these same technologies using a different business model, then I think a lot of the downsides that we're seeing might really be mitigated.
It's a real pleasure to have you here to talk about this. I mean, again, I'm always interested in the other lives of people. And so people know you for one thing, for great reason. But you have all this other stuff going on, and you've thought a lot about it. Thanks for coming in and talking to us.
Thanks for having me, man. Great to be here.
Real pleasure.